I had been back from 3 weeks of desert field training for exactly 8 minutes when it happened. My truck was still coated in sand, my uniform still smelled like smoke and sweat, and yet there I sat, blocked in the middle of my parents' quiet HOA neighborhood by a black Dodge Charger with a cheap red-blue flasher stuck to the dash. Then the guy stepped out, mirrored sunglasses, plastic badge, tactical vest from a Halloween clearance rack, and right behind him, Brenda Lockwood, the most power-drunk ex-HOA president in Copper Ridge Estates, grinning like she'd finally caught her most wanted criminal. Step out of the vehicle, the fake cop barked, hand on his toy badge. For dust on my tires, for a trailer full of camping gear, for daring to exist on a street she no longer even controlled. But Brenda had made one fatal mistake. If she'd glanced in her rearview mirror just once, she would have seen what was coming up the hill behind me. A full military convoy of soldiers who knew exactly who I was, and they were about to surround her entire operation. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever dealt with an out-of-control HOA, hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. You'd think after 3 weeks in the desert, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating protein bars shaped like punishment, and running drills until my legs forgot what mercy felt like, I'd get at least one peaceful drive home. 1 hour, one neighborhood, one street where nobody was trying to yell orders at me, Copper Ridge Estates. The place my parents had called home for nearly 20 years had always been a little particular. Nice lawns, trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes, the whole curated, polished, HOA-approved aesthetic. But I grew up here. I knew where the neighborhood ended and sanity began. I also knew exactly who had poisoned that line for the past 5 years. Brenda Lockwood. Brenda wasn't just a Karen, she was evolution's final form of one. She didn't walk, she marched. She didn't speak, she announced. And she didn't enforce rules. She created them out of thin air, taped them to people's doors, and dared anyone to question her printer's authority. And yet, earlier this year, something miraculous happened. She was voted out. Not by a slim margin, not quietly. The neighborhood practically threw a parade. I was overseas when the vote happened, but my dad emailed me the update with the subject line, "The dragon has fallen." So, imagine my surprise today, rolling into the neighborhood sunburned and exhausted, seeing new flyers taped to every lamppost. Neighborhood Patrol Authority active. Enforcement checks in progress. Report suspicious vehicles immediately. The font was bold, the grammar was questionable, and the signature at the bottom, Director Lockwood, was unmistakable. She wasn't just refusing to accept her defeat, she had escalated. I remember shaking my head and muttering, "Not today, please, not today." But the universe must have heard me and thought, challenge accepted, because that's when the Dodge Charger screeched in front of me, sideways across the road like he was boxing in a cartel smuggler. I wasn't even fully in the neighborhood yet. I was still driving down the hill, waving mentally at the houses I recognized, looking forward to Mom's casserole and Dad's stories about his tomato garden being under siege by rabbits. A peaceful homecoming, and instead, I got this circus. The Charger landed with a jerk, tires squealing, and out stepped the man who would become internet famous in under 48 hours, Dale Mercer. Picture a mall cop, now remove his training, then swap out his confidence for something he copied from a TV show. That was Dale. His sunglasses were so reflective, I could see my own annoyed expression in them. His vest didn't fit, his badge, NHP, Neighborhood Patrol Authority, looked like something ordered from an online costume shop at 2 a.m., and right behind him, descending like a queen to witness her own coronation, came Brenda Lockwood. She had the same tight ponytail, the same pastel cardigan, the same "I hold dominion over all I see" posture. I swear she had a notebook in her hand before she even reached my window. She lived for this. She breathed this. Chaos and control, her twin oxygen tanks. I took a slow sip of my warm lemon water and lowered the window halfway. I wasn't in the mood for theatrics, and I certainly wasn't about to entertain a fake traffic stop staged by a woman who once tried to fine my dad for having non-compliant garden gnomes. Dale cleared his throat like he expected me to salute. "Sir, you're being stopped for a community safety inspection," he said. "Is that so?" I replied flatly. "I'll need to see your license, registration, and military ID." I blinked once, and what jurisdiction is asking for that? "This neighborhood," Dale said, puffing his chest. "We're the designated enforcement officers. You're HOA police." I said. Neighborhood Patrol Authority, he corrected. Like that made it less ridiculous. Behind him, Brenda smirked. She'd found someone gullible enough to wear a vest for her. Lord help us all. Then she stepped forward and pointed at my tires. There, she said, dirt residue. That's a violation of our roadway appearance standards. Brenda, I replied, that is how dirt works. She didn't even blink. Your trailer is unvetted, she continued. Your vehicle is unwashed. You're entering the community in an unacceptable condition. I opened both hands. I've been in the desert for 3 weeks. And that, she said sternly, is not this neighborhood's problem. I swear to you. I felt my soul attempting to leave my body. Dale took a step closer, hand near a radio clipped to his vest that wasn't even turned on. Sir, step out of the vehicle. No, I said simply. His eyebrows shot up. Brenda's lips parted in triumph, as if she thought she had just won something. Dale, she said sharply. He's being non-compliant. Detain him. Detain him. She said that unironically, in the middle of a suburban street, with a man whose badge had more reflective plastic than authority. I leaned back, tilted my head slightly, and looked into my rearview mirror. And that's when I saw them. The convoy. My convoy. 4 trucks, 3 transports, and 1 Humvee rolling down the hill in a perfect staggered formation, dust trailing behind them like a slow-moving storm. Soldiers perched on the flatbed, shoulders relaxed, scanning the neighborhood like they couldn't quite believe what they were driving into. Captain Morales was in the lead vehicle, and every single person in that convoy knew me. I turned back to Dale, who was mid-lecture about officer discretion, and said, "You might want to turn around." "Sir," he snapped, "I am giving lawful inster." His voice died when he finally looked. He saw the flatbed, then the Humvee, then the 20 soldiers staring directly at him. His face went from arrogant confidence to digestive confusion in 2 seconds flat. Brenda spun around, hands on her hips, ready to scold someone she thought she outranked. She froze when she saw the Humvee flank the Charger. The flatbed stopped 10 feet behind my truck. The rest of the convoy fanned out, as if surrounding a hostile checkpoint. Captain Morales climbed out, eyes narrowing at the flashing light on Dale's dash. I watched Brenda's spine straighten. She was about to attempt the unthinkable pull rank on the United States Army. And that was the moment I knew this story was going to be one for the ages. Captain Elena Morales didn't walk. She cut through space like the air owed her rent. Even in the middle of a quiet suburban street, she carried the same authority she had when we were out in the desert, steady, unbothered, and absolutely allergic to nonsense. Her boots hit the pavement with purpose as she approached the Charger, and I watched the fake cop, Dale Mercer, the HOA's newest cosplay deputy, stand a little too straight, as if posture alone might turn him into law enforcement. For a moment, nobody spoke, not the soldiers, not the neighbors slowly drifting out onto their driveways, not even Brenda, the self-appointed queen of Copper Ridge Estates, who was visibly vibrating with a mix of anger, entitlement, and maybe a hint of fear she didn't want anyone to see. Captain Morales' eyes went straight to the cheap red-blue flasher on Dale's dashboard, then down to his mismatched tactical vest, then to his plastic badge. Finally, she looked at me. I gave the faintest shrug that said, "I have no idea either." "Sir," she said to Dale, crisp and stern, "identify your law enforcement agency." Dale's jaw opened and closed like he briefly forgot how English worked. Neighborhood Patrol Authority, NPA. We enforce community safety protocols. Under whose jurisdiction? The HOA's, he said, squaring his shoulders like he was proud of it. Brenda stepped forward, seeing her moment to reclaim the throne she'd been booted from months earlier. "Captain Morales, I appreciate your concern, but this matter is under community authority. We are detaining this resident for violations of neighborhood safety codes." Captain Morales turned her head slowly, slow enough that it made everybody watching flinch, and fixed Brenda with a look so flat it could have crushed concrete. "You are detaining a soldier returning from federal training," she said. "Under what legal statute?" Brenda lifted her chin. "Community Roadway Appearance Order 14B. "That's not a law," Morales replied. "It is within the HOA," Brenda insisted. "No," a voice called out from behind us. "It absolutely is not." Walking down the sidewalk, wearing a sun hat and holding a folded binder against her chest like a shield, was Linda Chavez, the real, current HOA president. Not dressed like a soldier, not dressed like a cop, just dressed like someone who was very tired of dealing with stupid people. She came to a stop beside Captain Morales and opened the binder, pulling out a sheet of paper. "Brenda," she said, "you were removed from the HOA board 3 months ago, unanimously." A murmur rippled through the growing crowd of neighbors. Brenda's face turned a shade redder than the clay-tiled roofs behind her. "That vote was illegitimate?" Brenda snapped. "No, it wasn't," Linda corrected calmly. "You were cited for abusing authority, issuing fake citations, and attempting to install private surveillance cameras on other people's property." "That was for safety," Brenda protested. "That was for ego," Linda replied. Captain Morales looked at me again, then back at Brenda and Dale, and said, "You two are impersonating authority and obstructing federal personnel. Step away from the vehicle." Dale tried to move casually, like he was just repositioning himself and not backing away from the United States Army. But it didn't help. One of the MPs stepped forward, tapped on his car window, and said, "Sir, is that light on your dashboard registered with emergency services?" Dale swallowed hard. "It's for volunteer enforcement." "Is it registered?" the MP repeated. "No." The MP opened the car door, reached in, and removed the flasher like pulling a toy out of a child's playroom. "This is being confiscated." Brenda gasped like they'd just seized a priceless artifact. "That's necessary for community safety," she yelled. "No," Morales said. "That's necessary for TikTok." A few soldiers laughed under their breath. Chaos rippled through the neighborhood. People stepped out onto their porches. Phones came out. Voices whispered down the block. "What's happening? Is that Brenda again? Is that the army?" A kid on a scooter yelled, "Mom, Brenda's getting arrested," which wasn't technically true, but emotionally accurate. I stayed in my truck, watching the entire HOA apocalypse unfold from the best seat in the house. Then Brenda, poor delusional Brenda, made the biggest mistake yet. She marched right up to the captain, actually marched, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "This man refused to follow my lawful commands," she declared. "He endangered my community and undermined my authority, and I want him cited immediately." Captain Morales inhaled slowly. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the kind of breath you take before delivering a reality check. Someone won't survive emotionally. "Ma'am," she said, "you have no authority." "Yes, I do," Brenda barked. "I was elected to protect this community from people like him." "You were removed," Linda repeated. "No, I was not." Linda sighed and held up the official removal document like a teacher, forcing a stubborn child to read the rules out loud. Brenda lunged for it. Linda pulled it back. The crowd actually gasped, and that was when Morrison, Private First Class Morrison, who had the subtlety of a brick and the patience of caffeine withdrawal, leaned forward on the flatbed and whispered loudly to his buddy, $20 says she tries to run." A few soldiers snorted, and right on cue, Brenda turned, eyes wild, scanning the street for what? An escape route, a sympathetic neighbor, a magical portal out of humiliation. Dale, meanwhile, stood completely still, looking like a kid who knew he was grounded before he even got home. I finally stepped out of my truck, stretching muscles that felt like warm rubber bands. I wasn't planning to get involved, not beyond cooperating with Captain Morales, but Brenda zeroed in on me like I was the final boss in a video game. "You," she snapped. "This is your fault." I blinked. "How is any of this my fault? You brought military vehicles into a private neighborhood. They followed me back from base," I said. "I didn't summon them like Pokemon. You should have notified the HOA." "I tried," I said, "but the HOA president was busy being replaced." More quiet laughter from the soldiers. Brenda's face twisted into something between outrage and constipation. "You mock the authority of this community," she hissed. "He mocks imaginary authority," Morales corrected. That line should have been carved into stone. Then it happened, the moment that would end up replayed thousands of times online. As I moved toward the truck bed to hand Morales my dashcam stick, Brenda stepped directly in front of me, arms spread wide, chest puffed out like she was directing aircraft. "You are not going anywhere," she said. I stopped. "Brenda, no. You will not walk away from an active investigation." "Investigation into what?" I asked. "Dirt. Obstruction," she snapped. "Of what?" "Your feelings." A teenage girl on her bike laughed so hard she nearly fell over. Captain Morales strode toward us. "Ma'am, step aside." Brenda didn't move. "You are obstructing a federal service member," Morales stated. Silence. Brenda still didn't move. And right at that moment, a neighbor across the street yelled, They're filming this for the app. Phones rose higher, more people stepped outside. A dog barked, like even he wanted her to stop. Morales nodded to her MP. "Document it," she ordered. The MP lifted his camera. Brenda finally took one grudging step back, but only after realizing this would absolutely end up on the neighborhood group chat, the local Facebook page, and possibly the evening news. I handed over the dashcam drive. Morales reviewed the footage across the hood of the Humvee. Her brows lowered, her jaw set. She didn't say anything at first, but her silence was surgical. She finally spoke without looking up. "This is no longer an HOA issue," she said. "This is a legal one." And Brenda's kingdom, built entirely on printer paper, threats, and delusion, collapsed faster than a folding chair under a sumo wrestler. Once Captain Morales finished reviewing the first few clips on my dashcam, her expression settled into something I recognized from training. The look of someone calculating consequences. Heavy ones. The kind that don't just fall, they land hard. Brenda must have sensed it too, because she suddenly stopped shouting and started fidgeting with the sleeve of her cardigan like she wanted to crawl inside it and disappear. Dale stood behind her, rigid, sweating, and looking like a man who desperately wished he had chosen literally any other hobby besides pretend cop. Morales finally looked up. "I need statements from both of you," she said to Brenda and Dale. "Right now." Dale opened his mouth, then closed it again. Brenda scoffed, folding her arms defiantly. "I don't answer to you," she said. "This is a private community matter. I answer only to the HOA. Linda stepped forward, eyebrows raised. "Brenda, you don't answer to the HOA either." "That vote was illegitimate," Brenda shot back, voice trembling. Linda sighed as though she'd practiced for this moment. 10 separate houses filed complaints. The board reviewed all of them. "You were removed. Officially, that's not true." Linda turned to the gathering crowd. "You all received the notice, right?" A ripple of voices confirmed it. Even a few nods came from porches farther down the street. Brenda's eye twitched. She looked like a balloon, slowly losing air. Captain Morales redirected her attention to Dale, who instantly straightened to his full height, unfortunately. That height wasn't very impressive. "Sir," Morales said. "What agency certified you as Neighborhood Patrol Authority?" Dale swallowed. The HOA?" Linda shook her head. "No. The HOA has no enforcement division. She appointed me," he said quickly, pointing at Brenda as if tossing her under a bus might save him. Brenda gasped. "You volunteered. You told me we were part of a sanctioned program," he yelled, voice cracking. "You said the sheriff approved it." All eyes snapped back to Brenda. Her smile twitched in and out of existence like a glitch in the Matrix. Morales nodded once to her military police officer. He stepped forward, turning to the crowd. "Just so the public is aware," he announced, "impersonating an officer or emergency responder is a criminal offense." A gasp rippled outward. Phones lifted higher. A teenager whispered, "This is the best day of my life." Brenda clenched her fists. "This is harassment." "No," Morales corrected. "This is accountability." I don't know if Brenda realized the moment she lost the last sliver of control she thought she had. Maybe it was when the MP confiscated the fake flasher from Dale's dashboard. Maybe it was when the neighbors started recording her like she was the main character of a reality show gone wrong. Or maybe it was when her last defender, Dale, publicly threw her under a convoy. But she definitely realized it when Morales gestured toward my truck. "Sergeant Walker," she said, "may I have the rest of your footage?" I removed the second memory card from the dashcam, handed it over. No dramatics, just quiet confirmation that the truth was fully documented. Brenda made a noise somewhere between a groan and a screech. "You can't use that. That's invasion of privacy. You obstructed a soldier on a public roadway?" Morales replied. "Your privacy ended when you created an illegal traffic stop." Dale let out a tiny whimper. Then, as if scripted by the universe itself, a door slammed somewhere across the street, and a familiar voice yelled, "She fined me for my door wreath." Heads turned. It was Mr. Collier, a retired Navy chief who'd lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone. He marched forward holding a wrinkled citation, slip in hand. "She said my Christmas wreath was emotionally disruptive," he barked. A few neighbors snorted. Someone muttered, "She fined my kid for chalk drawings." Morales raised an eyebrow. "It appears this is a recurring problem." "You have no idea," Linda murmured. And that's when the floodgates opened, like everyone in the neighborhood had been waiting years for this moment. She tried to ban wind chimes. She measured my grass with a ruler. She made me repaint my mailbox because she didn't like the shade of blue. She said my dog was too expressive. It was a chorus no, a symphony of pent-up grievances, each one landing like a nail in the coffin of Brenda's imaginary reign. Brenda's eye twitched violently. She spun toward the crowd, screaming, "I was protecting this neighborhood from what, Mrs.?" Collier yelled. "Birds." That got a full laugh from soldiers, neighbors, even the MP trying to keep a straight face. Brenda's rage boiled over. "You're all ungrateful. If you followed the rules, none of this would happen." Linda stepped closer, voice calmer than should have been legal. "Brenda, there were no rules. You made them up." "You're lying," Brenda shouted. "No," Linda said softly. "You are." I don't know what snapped in her then, but Brenda pivoted sharply and stormed toward me, finger pointed, jaw clenched so tight it could have cracked enamel. "You started this," she screamed. "You brought that convoy here to humiliate me." I raised an eyebrow. "Brenda, I literally just drove home." She seized the edge of my trailer like she planned to flip it with sheer spite. "You embarrassed me in front of my neighborhood," Linda responded gently. "It's not your neighborhood." Brenda turned with the speed of a malfunctioning robot. "Yes, yes." Captain Morales stepped between us before the situation escalated into whatever category comes after absurd. "Ma'am," she said firmly, "you need to step back." Brenda didn't. "Ma'am," Morales repeated. "You are obstructing an active investigation," Brenda shrieked. "I am the investigation." That line will go down in HOA meme history. Suddenly, everyone started talking at once, phones recording from every angle, and right in the middle of the chaos, Morales turned just enough for me to see her face. She looked done, not angry, not confused, not stern, just done. She turned to her MPs, "Escort both individuals to the curb for questioning." Dale obeyed instantly, practically sprinting toward the sidewalk. Brenda resisted until an MP stepped forward and simply gestured politely. She jerked away, stomping like a toddler mid-tantrum. While the MPs led them aside, Morales took a deep breath and addressed the neighbors. "For the sake of community safety," she said, "we need to review all available footage and statements. If anyone has documentation of previous incidents, please provide it." It was like she'd fired a starting pistol at a relay race. Neighbors lined up photos, videos, printed copies of fake citations, even screenshots from the community app showing Brenda threatening people with HOA compliance raids. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. As I leaned back against my truck, watching the evidence pile up, Morales returned to me. "Sergeant," she said, "thank you for keeping calm." I snorted. I figured stepping out of the truck might get me tackled by a guy wearing a $12 vest. She smirked faintly. "Good call." Then her expression shifted to something far more serious. "Walker, this goes beyond a traffic stop," I guessed. "We're treating this as impersonation, attempted unlawful detainment, and obstruction involving a federal service member." "Sounds accurate," she nodded. "And that's before we consider the pattern of harassment against military families." My stomach tightened. "There's more than today's." Morales pulled out her tablet. "We received multiple reports earlier. Apparently word spread quickly once the convoy stopped." As she scrolled, I scanned the summaries. False accusations of abandoned vehicles, threats to report military families to base housing, demanding access to barracks paperwork, completely illegal, attempting to enforce curfew hours, telling a military spouse she would review her eligibility to reside in Copper Ridge. Yeah, that did it. I no longer even pitied her. I just wanted her gone. Morales must have seen the shift in my expression. "We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again," she said quietly. For the first time all day, I felt the adrenaline begin to fade, and that's when Brenda, sitting on the curb with an MP beside her, suddenly screamed, "This is a setup, you're all against me." Morales didn't even turn. She simply handed me back my dashcam card. "Sergeant Walker," she said, "go home. We'll handle the rest." But little did I know this was nowhere near the end. I probably should have gone home like Captain Morales told me to. A normal person would have. But after 3 weeks in the desert, running drills under blistering sun, sharing tents with guys who snored like malfunctioning engines, and eating meals that legally qualified as punishment, I was wired on leftover adrenaline and stubborn curiosity. Besides, this was my parents' neighborhood. my neighborhood. And something told me this wasn't just a one-time incident. It was the final eruption of pressure that had been building for months. So I leaned against my truck, folded my arms, and watched the slow unraveling of the Copper Ridge tyrant. At first, Brenda sat rigidly on the curb, chin lifted, refusing to look at anyone. She had perfected the posture of a queen awaiting her advisors. But the longer she sat, surrounded by uniformed soldiers, MPs, neighbors with phones aimed at her, and a rapidly expanding mountain of evidence laid out on the hood of the Humvee, the more her composure cracked. Her lips twitched, her foot tapped, her eyes darted, searching for a lifeline that simply didn't exist. Meanwhile, the neighborhood transformed into a block party of catharsis. People arrived in clusters, carrying printed screenshots, old citations, photos, and even binders full of HOA letters they'd kept over the years because something about them felt wrong. Apparently, Brenda had been a one-woman violation factory long before today. I overheard snippets everywhere. She sent me a citation for having curtains she didn't approve. She measured my trash bin placement with a tape measure. She tried to fine us for having too many guests over for Thanksgiving. She told my husband the flagpole looked too assertive. She said my toddler's sidewalk chalk was graffiti. I swear, each complaint made the MP's eyebrows climb a millimeter higher. But then came something worse, something that made even the soldiers grow quiet. A woman stepped forward mid-30s, wearing a Fort Ironwood Family Readiness t-shirt. She held a folder against her chest, gripping it so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her husband followed a step behind, carrying a baby carrier with a sleeping infant inside. "Captain Morales," the woman said softly, "we have documentation." I could tell by the captain's face that she instantly shifted from HOA drama mode into military protective mode. "Go ahead," Morales said gently. The woman opened the folder. Inside were 7 citations, all fake, all printed on the same letterhead Brenda used for her self-created Copper Ridge Compliance Bureau, all targeting military families. She pointed to one. "This one was left on our door the morning after my husband deployed. She said our yard looked unstable and threatened to report us to base housing." Her voice didn't shake, but something behind her eyes did. "Another one," she continued, "accused me of storing military equipment improperly. It was a diaper bag." Neighbors murmured in outrage. The husband stepped forward, silent but visibly furious. But it was the final paper that made even Brenda's mask crack. The woman held up a letter, long, detailed, and stamped with a fake Copper Ridge seal. "This one," she said, "accused us of violating community stability expectations. Brenda wrote that if we didn't improve the presentation of military families in the neighborhood, she would personally contact his commanding officer." A chill passed through the crowd. "You don't threaten a soldier's career. You don't even pretend to. That crosses a line you cannot uncross." Captain Morales didn't speak for a solid 5 seconds. She just stared at the letter, processing its audacity. "Do you have any indication this woman actually attempted to contact base housing?" Morales finally asked. The husband nodded. "They received a voicemail." Gasps spread like a brush fire. "You have it recorded," the captain pressed. "We do." Morales snapped her fingers. "MP Garcia, document the audio." I glanced at Brenda. Her face had gone pale, in a way I didn't think possible for someone who fueled herself on the fire of her own self-importance. Her jaw dropped slightly, and for the first time since the convoy arrived, she looked scared. Not angry, not outraged, scared. Dale, sitting a few feet from her on the curb, slid his hands over his face. He probably realized this wasn't just a volunteer patrol gone wrong. This could be charges far beyond impersonation. Morales handed the letters to her comms officer. "This is targeted harassment against military families. That elevates this incident significantly. Thank you both for coming forward." The woman nodded, stepping back to her husband, who wrapped an arm around her shoulders protectively. I should have looked away, should have minded my own business. But seeing that infant sleeping in the carrier, completely unaware that some petty HOA vigilante had tried to bully his family, something inside me snapped. That could have been my family, my parents, my fiancé, my future kids. Brenda didn't just cross a line, she set it on fire, danced across it, and then threatened to fine whoever tried to put it out. Suddenly, Morales signaled for the crowd to quiet. She turned to me. "Sergeant Walker," she said, "I need your statement as well." I stepped forward, recounting everything from the moment the charger cut me off to the instant Brenda tried to block my path physically. Morales nodded through the whole thing, occasionally jotting notes. Then, when I finished, she asked, "Did she ever threaten you before today?" I hesitated. "Indirectly, yes. She used to leave warnings at my parents' house, told them my truck violated aesthetic standards because it projected an aggressive presence." Morales blinked. "It's a truck." "Exactly. Anything else?" "Well, once she told my dad he shouldn't fly the flag on weekdays because it sent the wrong message." The captain closed her notebook very slowly. "Noted." At that exact moment, Brenda surged to her feet, pointing at me with wild desperation. "Lies," she screamed. "Every last one of you. He's manipulating you. They're all manipulating you." She gestured furiously at the neighbors, at the soldiers, at Linda. "You're conspiring against me because I enforce order, because I protect standards, because I—" She didn't finish, because the MP beside her calmly said, "Ma'am, please remain seated." "I will not sit," she shrieked. "I am the authority here. I demand recognition. I demand." I didn't know whether to feel secondhand embarrassment or secondhand joy. Then the MP raised his voice, just enough. "Ma'am, sit down." And she did, instantly, like someone unplugged her. As the MP stepped away, I saw Captain Morales exchange a brief look with Linda Chavez, a look that said, "This is not just a neighborhood problem anymore." Morales returned to the center of the street. "Everyone," she announced, "we are coordinating with the sheriff's department. Officers are en route. Once they arrive, we will transfer all evidence and proceed with formal interviews." A neighbor clapped, then another, then a few more. Spontaneous applause. In the middle of the street, because the reign of Queen Brenda the Unhinged was finally, blessedly, cracking apart, Brenda squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head violently, as if refusing to accept reality by sheer force of will. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. This isn't happening. I did everything right. Everything." The sad part? She believed that, with her whole soul. The even sadder part. Nobody believed her anymore. Not even Dale, who now sat hunched over, elbows on knees, face buried in his hands, like a man realizing he'd signed up for a fantasy football league that turned out to be a cult. And yet, the neighborhood wasn't done. An older man stepped forward well into his 70s, wearing a Korean War veteran cap. He held a letter trembling in his hand. "She threatened to have me expelled from the HOA if I didn't remove my flag," he said, voice unsteady. "My wife cried for 2 days." Brenda's eyes shot open. "That was months ago," she yelled. "Let it go." "No," Morales said quietly. "You let it go." Brenda looked up at her blankly. "What? You let go of your authority, months ago, and you couldn't handle it?" Brenda blinked rapidly. Her lower lip trembled, and for the first time all day, she looked truly defeated. Not outraged, not righteous, defeated. But this story wasn't ending here. Because as the sheriff cruisers finally rolled into Copper Ridge Estates, lights flashing, neighbors cheering like they were watching a parade, I realized something. Brenda's downfall wasn't just going to be a neighborhood event. It was going to be a spectacle, a public reckoning, and the beginning of something much, much bigger than a fake HOA cop with a vest from Amazon. The sheriff cruisers rolled in, slow, steady, and beautifully official. Nothing like Dale's dollar store Dodge Charger with its flashing Amazon beacon. The second the real law enforcement arrived, the entire atmosphere shifted. What had been chaotic, almost comedic, suddenly became serious, heavy, consequential. Brenda stiffened on the curb as the first deputy stepped out of his vehicle. He was tall, calm, and carried the kind of presence you can't fake authority, that doesn't need to shout. His badge gleamed under the afternoon sun. I saw Brenda look at it the way a vampire looks at a cross. The deputy approached Captain Morales first. "Captain," he said respectfully, "we got your call. Multiple reports from residents too? Sounds like we've got a situation." "That's an understatement," Morales replied, handing over a folder. "Impersonation of law enforcement, unlawful detainment, obstruction involving a federal service member, and multiple accounts of targeted harassment." The deputy nodded slowly as he flipped through the papers like he was reading the most absurd novel ever written. "Who's the primary?" he asked. Morales gestured toward Brenda. The deputy paused, eyebrows rising. "Her, A soldier in the convoy muttered. "Oh yeah, buckle up, sir." Then Morales pointed to Dale, and him. Dale visibly shrank. The deputy nodded again. "All right. Let's get statements." But Brenda wasn't going down quietly. As the deputy approached, she sprang to her feet like a startled cat. "Before you say anything," she snapped, "I want to make it very clear that these people are conspiring against me. They have been undermining my authority since the moment I—" The deputy lifted a hand. "Ma'am, please calm down." No, I will not calm down. This is my community. I am responsible for maintaining standards, and this," she flung her arm toward me, "this man is the reason all of this is happening." I raised a brow. "Ma'am, I literally just drove home. You brought an army with you? They were already behind me. That's semantics." The deputy exhaled slowly. I could tell he'd dealt with his share of Karens, but this was the boss level. "Ma'am," he tried again, "I need you to answer a few questions." "No. I will not answer anything until someone acknowledges my authority." "What authority?" Linda Chavez said, stepping forward. "You were removed, officially, legally, democratically." Brenda rounded on her. "You staged that vote?" Linda deadpanned. "Brenda, you threatened my husband with a citation because he left his rake in the yard for 12 minutes? It was unsightly." Brenda exploded. Someone in the crowd snorted. A soldier coughed to disguise a laugh. The deputy blinked hard, trying to maintain composure. "Okay," he said, clapping his hands once. "Enough. Let's separate everyone." Morales nodded. "MPs will handle Walker and witnesses. Deputies handle suspects." "Suspects?" Brenda wheeled around, horrified. "You think I'm a suspect?" "You impersonated law enforcement," Morales said. "I did not." "You gave orders to a civilian using a fake officer?" "With a fake badge. In a fake vehicle stop." "That wasn't fake." Brenda pointed at Dale. "He was certified." Dale immediately blurted. "I was not certified." Her head snapped toward him, betrayal blazing in her eyes. "You lied to me." "I thought you knew what you were doing," Dale squeaked. "You told me we had sheriff approval," Brenda sputtered. "I said we had unofficial tolerance." "That's not a thing," the deputy snapped. The crowd laughed. Even the toddler on a neighbor's hip giggled. Brenda trembled, shifting from rage to panic. I was acting in good faith. I was protecting everyone. I saw a suspicious vehicle, and an unapproved trailer, and a military presence." "You live next to a base," Morales said flatly. "But he had dirt on his tires," she insisted. The deputy finally lost it. "Ma'am," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose, "every vehicle has dirt on its tires. Not in my neighborhood." He looked at Morales. Morales looked at me. I looked at the sky, wondering if maybe a meteor would feel merciful. The deputy took a breath. "Ma'am, whether you intended to or not, you acted outside the law. That's ridiculous. You formed an illegal enforcement group. It was voluntary. You issued false citations. They weren't false. They were preventative. You attempted to stop a soldier returning from duty. That's his fault. You told military families you could have their housing reviewed. That was constructive criticism. You left threatening letters. They were motivational. Ma'am." He paused, staring at her. "You weren't protecting this neighborhood. You were terrorizing it." The street fell silent. Brenda's mouth opened, but nothing came out this time. Not even a squeak. It was the moment she realized her shield of imagined authority had shattered, leaving her standing in front of the entire neighborhood with nothing but a cardigan and a bruised ego. Then the deputy turned to Dale. "And you," he said, "anything you'd like to say?" Dale took the deepest breath I've ever seen a human take. "I'm sorry," he blurted. "I didn't know," she said. "We were doing community service. She said we'd keep the neighborhood safe. She said I'd get a real badge eventually." Brenda's eyes bulged like a frog blinking in slow motion. "I never said that." "Yes, you did," Dale insisted. "You said you had connections. I meant connections at Home Depot." At that point, one of the soldiers had to walk away because he was laughing so hard he nearly dropped his rifle. The deputy rubbed his temples. "All right, both of you. Sit down and don't speak unless spoken to." Brenda gasped, as if he'd slapped her with a constitution. "I will not be spoken to like a child." "Then stop behaving like one," Linda muttered. Several neighbors murmured approval. Brenda sat, hard, like the ground had personally offended her. The deputy began interviewing Dale while another officer approached Brenda. Meanwhile, Morales and the MPs spread out to take more statements from neighbors. It quickly became clear just how deep the problem went. A man from down the block told Morales that Brenda once took photos of his teenagers through their front window because she suspected unauthorized activity. Unauthorized activity equals watching movies too loudly. Another neighbor admitted Brenda had threatened to sue him for having an overly enthusiastic welcome mat. A young mother recounted how Brenda followed her for 2 blocks while she walked her toddler because the stroller clashed with the HOA aesthetic palette. Even the jogger, who always ran shirtless, chimed in, saying Brenda tried to write him up for excessive torso visibility. Every story was worse than the last, and every story added fuel to the legal wildfire now burning at Brenda's feet. While the deputies compiled reports, a few soldiers leaned against the flatbed truck, enjoying the show. "Best deployment debrief ever," one muttered. "Should we send her a citation?" Another joked. "Violation of Sanity Code 101. Morales overheard and said, "Don't give her ideas." Meanwhile, I stood beside my truck, arms crossed, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Justice unfolding in real time. Not the slow, bureaucratic kind. Not the kind you hear about months later in an email. Real justice, public, undeniable, finally aimed at the person who had made this neighborhood miserable for years. But it wasn't over, because suddenly the deputy straightened, turned toward Brenda, and said the words that changed everything. "Ma'am, based on the evidence provided and the number of documented complaints, we're submitting this case for criminal charges." Her face went white. "Criminal," she whispered. But I'm the HOA." "No," Linda said softly. "You're just a resident. And a suspect," Morales added. Brenda shook her head violently. No, this isn't how this works. I am the law here. I am the—" Her voice cracked, and in that moment, surrounded by soldiers, neighbors, law enforcement, and a pile of evidence taller than her pride, Brenda Lockwood finally broke. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even dignified. She simply sagged forward, like the weight of her own delusions had finally crushed her. But fate wasn't done with her yet, because the most humiliating moment of her entire life was still to come. The moment Brenda's shoulders collapsed inward, it felt like the entire street exhaled for the first time in years. Copper Ridge Estates had been living under her self-appointed dictatorship so long that seeing her finally face consequences felt almost surreal. But the universe wasn't finished with her, not even close. While deputies conferred with Captain Morales and the MPs gathered the last pieces of evidence, the neighborhood's pent-up silence transformed into something else. Resolve. People who had once tiptoed around Brenda's wrath were now standing tall, handing over documents, screenshots, and videos, with the confidence of witnesses who knew finally someone was listening. But among the crowd, one person stepped forward with a sort of quiet fury that demanded everyone's attention. Mr. Dillard, a Navy veteran in his late 50s, built like a man carved from desert rock. Calm in a way that only comes from surviving things much bigger than HOA disputes, he carried himself with discipline and dignity. But when he looked at Brenda, something colder sat beneath the surface. He cleared his throat. "Deputy, I need to add something." The deputy nodded. "Go ahead, sir." Dillard held up a printed letter, the same awful Copper Ridge Compliance Bureau template Brenda had used for months. "This," he said, "was left on my door the week after my wife started chemo." A hush swept the street. I felt my jaw clench. He handed the paper to the deputy, who scanned it quickly. The more he read, the tighter his jaw grew. The letter was brutal, cold, bureaucratic, Brenda style. It claimed the Dillard home violated aesthetic standards due to overgrown shrubbery and visible clutter, which, according to the date, had appeared the same week. Mrs. Dillard became too weak to tend their yard. But that wasn't the worst part. Near the bottom, Brenda had written, "Failure to maintain the standard appearance of Copper Ridge may result in fines or an HOA mandated service review. In other words, pay up or get punished." The deputy closed his eyes briefly, as if the stupidity physically hurt. "Sir," he asked, "did you address this with the HOA at the time?" "I tried," Dillard said, voice steady. "But Brenda blocked my emails, threatened additional fines, and told my wife she was disturbing the community image when she left our garbage bins out an extra morning after her treatment." Someone behind me whispered, "That's evil," Morales muttered. "Monstrous." I felt my hands curl into fists. Brenda's head snapped up. I was enforcing standards. Dillard didn't even look at her. You abused people. I abided by the rules of this community. There were no rules, Linda shouted. You wrote them, and someone had to, Brenda shrieked. This place was falling apart. The deputy slammed the folder shut, tone no longer patient. Ma'am, that's enough. You've done more harm to this neighborhood than any other single resident. Brenda's mouth trembled. I was trying to help. You terrorized the community under the pretense of authority, the deputy said, and now it's time to face the consequences of your actions. For once, Brenda didn't argue. She simply stared at the ground, hands trembling, the crown she had crafted in her mind dissolving in real time. But her downfall wasn't just due to law enforcement, it was the neighbors, united, finally speaking out, and that unity sparked something I didn't expect, a shift toward rebuilding. As deputies separated Brenda and Dale for more questioning, neighbors grouped near Linda Chavez. She stood on the curb with her binder, overwhelmed but determined. Everyone, Linda said, projecting her voice. Once the deputies finish their work here, I'll be calling an emergency HOA meeting in 3 days. We need to rewrite our enforcement guidelines, restructure the board, and mend what's left of community trust. A murmur of agreement spread, but then she looked at me. Ethan, I'd like you to be there. Not as a witness. Well, yes. That too, but as someone with actual leadership experience, someone who understands proper authority. Not this, Brenda scoffed from the curb. You're recruiting a soldier into the HOA? What's next? Building a bunker? No, Linda replied calmly. Building accountability. Linda stepped closer, lowering her voice. We need someone who won't abuse power, someone this neighborhood respects, someone who listens. I blinked. Me? You kept calm in a situation that would have sent most people into panic. You handled yourself with integrity. Those traits matter. I rubbed the back of my neck. Linda, I don't even technically live here anymore. These are my parents' streets. All the better, she replied. You don't have personal stakes in the board's decisions. No yard to argue over, no fences to feud about, just logic. A soldier behind me mumbled, Bro, do it. B, the HOA Batman? I shot him a glare. He shrugged, just saying. Before I could respond, a neighbor, a middle-aged woman holding a baby, approached shyly. Ethan, she said, we'd feel safer with someone like you on the board. Then someone else stepped forward. You'd be fair. Another voice. You'd hold people accountable. And another. You'd stop another Brenda before she starts. I didn't expect any of this. I came home expecting a shower and maybe a nap, not a public nomination for local governance. But looking at these people, real people, exhausted people, people who'd been bullied into silence, it struck me, someone needed to be a shield here, someone who understood what authority is and what it isn't. The deputies finished their reports. Brenda and Dale were escorted to separate patrol cars. Not arrested, not yet, but being transported for formal interviews at the station. Neighbors recorded every second, ensuring no detail would escape the community's collective memory. As Brenda stepped into the cruiser, she caught my eye. This isn't over, she hissed. I'll come back stronger. You'll see. They need me. I shook my head gently. No, Brenda. They need peace. She slammed the car door with enough force to alarm the toddler nearby. The deputies loaded up, the convoy repositioned, and slowly, almost anticlimactically, the street returned to something resembling normalcy. But nothing was the same. Not for me, not for the neighbors, not for Copper Ridge Estates. 3 days later, the clubhouse overflowed with residents. I'll tell that story next. But on that afternoon, as soldiers waved goodbye and drove off, as neighbors thanked Morales and the deputies, as parents scooped up their kids to finally go inside and breathe, I stood alone beside my truck, watching, thinking, processing. This neighborhood didn't just need emergency cleanup, it needed reconstruction of trust, rules, leadership, and for the first time, I actually considered what they'd asked me. Serve on the HOA board. Me, an Army reservist. A man who once lost a 2-week battle with a weed whacker. A man who kept his socks in numerical rotation and still couldn't fold a fitted sheet correctly. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt right. Brenda had ruled through fear. Maybe it was time someone ruled through reason. As I got into my truck, my dad walked up from the house. He'd been watching from the porch. He knocked on the window. I rolled it down. You thinking what I think you're thinking? he asked. I sighed. Maybe, he smiled. Good. This place could use a walker running things. You just want someone to stop Brenda from resurrecting herself, I said. That too, he admitted. Then he added quietly, your mom would have been proud. That stuck to me like desert dust. I drove home feeling something rare. Purpose. Not the battlefield kind, the neighborhood kind. And I had no idea just how wild that journey was about to get. 3 days after the Brenda meltdown of Copper Ridge, the community clubhouse looked like it was hosting the Super Bowl of neighborhood drama. Cars lined both sides of the street. People crowded near the entrance, arms folded, clipboards out, ready to witness history. Inside, the folding chairs were pulled out of storage. All of them. Even the mismatched ones they normally hid during HOA potlucks. Every seat was taken. The walls were lined with residents who'd grown tired of living under what my dad jokingly called the regime of Queen Cardigan. I walked in with the same uneasy mix of hope and dread you get right before jumping out of a perfectly good aircraft. Linda Chavez waved me over to the front row. There he is, she said with relief. Our advisor-to-be. I held up a hand. Let's not get ahead of. Too late. Half the room applauded. Great. No pressure. A projector screen stood behind the makeshift podium. Across it, in big bold letters, someone had typed, Emergency HOA Restructuring Meeting, aka the Brenda Aftermath. Someone had added the last line in pen. Linda tapped the mic. Thank you all for coming, she began. As you know, we are here to address the damage caused by the unauthorized actions of one former board member. A voice from the back shouted, Ex-dictator? Another? Neighborhood menace? Linda cleared her throat. Yes, Brenda Lockwood. A ripple of murmurs moved across the room like wind through tall grass. But tonight isn't just about what she did. It's about how we rebuild. This neighborhood deserves stability, transparency, and leadership that actually listens. People nodded. Some even clapped again. Linda gestured toward me, and I've asked someone to join us tonight, someone who showed extraordinary composure and integrity during last week's incident. I could feel my ears turning red. I am not built for public spotlights unless they're headlights on a dusty convoy trail. This is Ethan Walker, Linda continued, and I'd like to officially nominate him as a special advisor to the HOA board. Gasps, applause, a few surprised murmurs. One guy whispered loudly, I'd vote for him for president. Another said, he survived Brenda. He can survive anything, a woman asked her husband. Do you think he'll fix the parking rules? Someone hissed. Shut up, Carol, not now. Linda nodded at me. Ethan, would you like to say a few words? No, I absolutely did not, but I stood up anyway. I walked to the podium, cleared my throat, and felt dozens of eyes land on me like drones locking onto a target. Hi, I said brilliantly, because I have the charisma of a toaster under pressure. So, this wasn't really in my plans. A ripple of laughter. I came home last week expecting a shower and maybe a nap. Instead, I was detained by a man wearing a vest from the clearance easel and interrogated by a woman who thought she outranked the United States Army. Laughter grew louder. But here's the thing, I continued. What happened wasn't funny, not really. It showed something broken, something dangerous. Someone was allowed to wield imaginary power for so long that she forgot what authority even means. Silence settled, heads nodded. Authority isn't about control, I said. It's about responsibility, service, protecting people, not threatening them. And the fact that so many of you came forward with stories, well, that tells me something important. I scanned the room. You were scared to speak, scared to push back, scared of someone who had no real power in the first place. A few people lowered their eyes. That needs to change, I said firmly. And if I can help make sure no one ever gets to play pretend cop again, HOA, or otherwise, then I'm willing to step up. Applause erupted. Not polite applause, real applause. The kind that carries relief and hope and a little pent-up rage. I nodded awkwardly and stepped back. Relieved to escape the podium without having fainted or spontaneously combusted, Linda took over again. Thank you, Ethan. Now, let's get into specifics. The meeting rolled on. Neighbors brought forward a staggering pile of materials, fake citations, intimidating letters, photos of Brenda spying through hedges, video of her measuring a woman's mailbox with a level, screenshots of her threatening to inspect backyards without notice. One guy had footage of her walking around at night with a flashlight and a clipboard like, she was hunting raccoons. Linda organized everything with the efficiency of an air traffic controller. By the time we finished reviewing the evidence, everyone unanimously agreed the HOA needed several immediate reforms. No resident may enforce rules physically or verbally, outside official board processes. No patrols, no badges, no lights, period. Any violation must be documented with actual evidence, not personal opinion. No citation may be issued without full board review. Military families may not be singled out or targeted under any circumstances. The HOA must maintain an official partnership with local police, not attempt to replace them. A new advisory role be created for community oversight. And then, the final agenda item, electing the new special advisor. Linda turned to the room, all in favor of appointing Ethan Walker. Hands shot up like fireworks. All of them, even the guy who always looked perpetually annoyed, even the older woman who kept muttering "bless his heart" whenever I spoke, even the jogger who'd been fined for excessive torso visibility. It was unanimous. I sat frozen, unsure if I'd just been honored or drafted. Linda smiled. "Well, Ethan, welcome to the HOA, Factionator." My dad winked at me from the second row. Great. He was proud. Now I couldn't back out even if I wanted to. But the real surprise came after the meeting ended. As people mingled, thanking me, shaking my hand, telling horror stories about Brenda's reign of terror, someone lingered near the door, wearing sunglasses, indoors. It took me a second to realize who it was. Brenda Lockwood, hair pulled back so tight it could snap, lips pursed, shoulders squared like she wanted to march into the meeting and demand they reinstate her crown. But she didn't come inside. She just stared, arms crossed. Waiting, I stepped outside, closing the clubhouse door behind me. "Brenda," I said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." She didn't blink. "You think you've won?" "This isn't about winning." "Yes, it is." Her voice cracked. "And you took everything from me." "I took nothing," I replied. "You lost it when you abused it. You'll regret this," she whispered. "All of you will. You don't know what you've started." It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like someone mourning a kingdom that had never actually existed. She turned sharply and walked away, her footsteps echoing across the pavement like punctuation marks of resentment. I watched her disappear into the evening shadows, and it hit me. This wasn't the end of her story, or mine, or the neighborhood's, but it was the beginning of something better, something healthier, something almost hopeful. And as the clubhouse door swung open behind me, and neighbors spilled into the cool night air, laughing, chatting, living without fear, I realized why I felt so grounded in that moment. It wasn't because I'd been appointed to the HOA. It was because, for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt like home again. If there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's this. Real authority isn't loud. It doesn't bully. It doesn't demand obedience or hide behind fake rules and borrowed power. Real authority is quiet. It listens. It protects. It steps forward when needed and steps back when it's not. Brenda wasn't evil. She was terrified of losing control, and that fear turned her into someone who hurt the very people she claimed to protect. That's what unchecked power does. It grows in the dark, feeding on silence. But the moment a community finds its voice, even the loudest bully falls quiet. So, if you're watching this, ask yourself, where in your life are you staying silent out of convenience or fear? And more importantly,